What up, fellas? Week 11, takeaways, rapid reactions, dynasty trades, early look at the waiver wire. You guys know what we do here around Mondays. Apologies for last week. We weren't here. I was too busy getting a colonoscopy. So trust me, I wanted to be here as well. But we're going to start things off as we always do, talking about the major injuries of week 11. And there was a lot. And a lot of really good fantasy relevant players went down, and it was not a great scene for a lot of us involved. So let's get things kicked off. I'll just rapid fire go off all the injuries. And then, Danny, if you want to give your thoughts on any specific players there. So, injury number one, Cooper Kupp, right ankle injury, did not return to the game, awaiting more details. Doesn't sound overly serious, but also doesn't sound minor either because he didn't return.
Yeah, I mean, I was watching the game. I saw they pulled him off to the sideline. They were really working on him. He was grimacing in pain. I don't know, what the signs are there. Again, like you kind of said, probably more so an intermediate type of injury. I don't expect him to miss maybe even more than 1 week, to be quite honest. But for an older player that's been dealing with injuries all year, like this is concerning. He came into the year hurt. He's been hurt.
Same ankle he had surgery on, by the way.
I just don't want to deal with it, man. I don't want to deal with it. And if you have Puka Nacua, obviously he had a big bounce back in the game. Only had one reception, caught a touchdown in that first reception in the first half. And the second half, as soon as Cooper Kupp comes down, we just see, prime Puka Nacua come back out. 6 targets in the second half. Looks efficient, was the only semblance of life that the Rams offense had in what was a really impressive win. Now the Rams potentially have their playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, for sure. So Cooper Kupp, I mean, one of those gut feeling takes for me coming into the year was I'm like, I just don't want to draft Cooper Kupp. I'm nervous about the injury. I think 2021 Cooper Kupp is long gone. There wasn't a whole lot of analysis on my part to tell me why I just didn't want to draft the guy, but this is kind of what the major risk was. Older player coming off of an injury. He's been struggling all season with them. So Joe Burrow, another huge loss to fantasy managers for people who have Joe Burrow, for people who have Jamar Chase, people who have T. Higgins. Unfortunately for me and you and Ron, we have all 3 of those players. So our season is probably done in our FFPC league, which is not ideal. We were in a playoff spot coming into this week, or maybe 2 weeks ago. We were just outside the playoffs coming into this week. Not a great situation. So if you have Joe Burrow, I mean, in redraft, you're going to have to figure it out on the waiver wire. In Dynasty, if you're not a competitive team, like ergo, you have Joe Burrow and now you're no longer competitive, I would not sell Joe Burrow for a competitive quarterback just to try and scratch and claw to 4th place in your league. Sometimes you just get screwed by injuries. Like I've seen a lot of people go out there and be like, you should sell Joe Burrow for this quarterback because if you're contending, a championship's all that matters. But realistically, if you lost Joe Burrow in a dynasty league and now it affects because you had Chase or something as well, like it's difficult to just then, make one trade and patchwork the whole thing and still be a top 5 or top 3 team, especially in your league.
In my personal opinion, the only way I would transition off of them is if a team that's not a heavy contender has one of the top 6 guys. We're talking like, can you, add a little bit to get to Lamar Jackson or Justin Herbert or someone like that? If you're getting another needle moving asset, another franchise asset past this year, I don't mind adding, a little bit of an incentive, a little bit of a plus if you're a strong contender. However, if you're A, not a strong contender, just keep Joe Burrow. Or B, if you're a strong contender and the best offers you're getting are like Dak plus a second, or I mean, I've seen
people have to pay Joe Burrow plus for Kyler Murray, which if you're selling Joe Burrow to a rebuilding team who has Kyler Murray, it should be a 1-for-1 swap. If anything, you getting something on top of Kyler Murray back.
1-for-1's more respectful.
1-for-1 is reasonable, especially if it's the situation where one team's not contending, one team is contending, then it makes sense for both sides. But Joe Burrow, not a great situation. I mean, the latest quarterback to go down for the rest of the year, it's a massacre this season with all the guys going down. Speaking of massacres, a string of running back injuries probably sunk a lot of fantasy matchups this past week. Devon Achane, right knee injury. It was the same knee that he was out on IR with. Cautious. By the sounds of it, somebody landed on it hard. Could miss a game, but it looks like it was more of a cautious play than anything. Obviously, brutal for your fantasy matchups if you started him over especially good options, like somebody that got there, like a Saquon Barkley, for example. Obviously, made me look pretty stupid for having him at 21. Achane probably going to miss a game, maybe not. We'll have to wait on more details for him. I don't even really want to comment on Achane's health status until we hear what exactly happened. But it does sound like it wasn't major. It wasn't a serious re-aggravation at the very least.
And I mean, that just adds insult to injury with our FFPC team, considering the fact
because we have Achane, Burrow, Higgins, and Chase. So this team is dead in the water right now. Kenneth Walker, Also, probably the biggest fantasy implications news injury wise, because Kenneth Walker's injury has two offsets, right? Because Kenneth Walker, it sounds like he suffered a moderately serious oblique strain, maybe a grade 1 or grade 2 oblique strain, more severe than the one that Christian McCaffrey was dealing with a couple weeks ago, and he ended up playing through. The 3-week timeline is the number I've seen floated around by fantasy doctors. So this obviously will have ramifications for Zach Charbonnet, who I've talked about literally as if we nuked every running back around the league, Zach Charbonnet would be the RB1 in fantasy because he's the most talented backup running back in the entire NFL. So Kenneth Walker going down for a couple games. If you guys have Charbonnet on your waiver wire, if you have him on your roster, he's probably rostered. He's about 45% rostered across leagues. He is definitely going to be a usable RB2 at best.
21 opportunities in that game against the Rams, 6 targets, caught all 6 of them. Like, he is getting a full-fledged workhorse role. Not to mention, you made the comparison, the parallel to the injury that CMC suffered. The difference is that CMC, as much as we like Jordan Mason, as much as we like Elijah Mitchell, is way more talented than every single San Francisco running back. Kenneth Walker, like, he's a good, explosive running back. I can make the argument right now that Charbonnet is a better running back on a down-and-down basis. Kenneth Walker, they're not going to rush him back if Zach Charbonnet is giving him similar, if not even better production.
Yeah, especially knowing that there is like areas that Charbonnet is unequivocally better than Kenneth Walker, like catching the football. And, when you need a
Pass
3rd and 2, for example, like that's Zach Charbonnet is the guy that's going to get you. Kenneth Walker, he's great at, making the big plays and breaking off the long runs. And generally speaking, he's a net positive to your offense because even though he'll give you some negative runs, he'll also give you some really positive ones. Like you said, if Kenneth Walker is dealing with any kind of like lingering issues, it makes sense for them to hold him out. Use Zach Charbonnet. It's why you drafted him in the 2nd round. So he is going to be a very popular waiver ad. All of your fab if he's available. If not, hope like myself and Danny do already have him on our home league roster. So I'm glad I just held him. And I talked about him, I believe 2 weeks ago, as one of the best ads in fantasy for this specific reason. If Kenneth Walker ever went down, he could be a league winner. Even though it's a tough schedule, I feel really confident in him. Similarly, Aaron Jones, MCL sprain is the diagnosis I've heard. Not ruling out an ACL tear is also what I've heard. I don't think it's an ACL tear based on what I've heard from these doctors, but it is a moderate to severe MCL sprain, which could cause him to go on IR, could be done for the season potentially. And AJ Dillon, as much as he's had his opportunities and not really shined in them this year, he's going to be an RB2 just based on pure volume alone, especially now that Green Bay looked pretty decent this past week. Maybe they're going to show some signs of life.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. MCL sprains are no joke, especially at the running back position. You need the ability to cut on a dime. You need the ability to move swiftly, especially if you're a running back like Aaron Jones is, who wins on speed, who wins on his movement. He's not going to be like AJ Dillon, where if AJ Dillon's banged up, guess what? He's still 240 pounds, and he's still going to convert 3 yards on a 3rd and 2. You know what I'm saying? With Aaron Jones, it's like he needs that movement ability, given his stature, to be able to play at a high level. So if he's hindered at all, like you mentioned, moderate to severe MCL strain, like this could get ugly, especially on a team that is probably the most average team in the NFL. You would say Green Bay is?
I saw a chart actually that was like showing the offensive DVOA and defensive DVOA, and it was like the Bucks, the Packers, and I think the Broncos, or maybe some other team that were like dead center in the middle of the. I'm like, that's exactly correct. Like those are the average teams in the league.
It's like they'll look good against the teams below them, and then they'll look a class below against the teams above them. Like they are like the epitome of average. No offense.
Exactly. So a couple other injuries. Mark Andrews out for the year. We'll talk about Isaiah Likely later on. Tyreek Hill had a hand injury, did return to the game, should be fine going forward. Geno Smith, throwing elbow, maybe a UCL sprain, but he did come back after just 2 drives. Short turnaround, though, because they do play on Thanksgiving night against San Francisco 49ers in a game that you probably got to win. It's a divisional matchup. You're trying to keep your playoff hopes, on track and that kind of thing. So not a great situation for Geno.
Well, it's scary with Geno too, because not only is he dealing with this, obviously, right now, he's got the Thursday game, like you mentioned, and then they have a short wraparound because they do also play next Thursday night against the Dallas Cowboys. Jesus. So it's like
2 Thursdays in a row they're playing.
Same with Dallas, 2 Thursdays in a row, and your quarterback's dealing with an elbow injury, triceps injury. Like, it's going to get ugly, man.
Yeah, that's a really weird way to structure that in the schedule. And then also other injuries that just quickly rapid fire. Deontay Foreman sounds like he re-injured his ankle, may be out, also playing on Thursday. So possible that he's going to be out. Khalil Herbert, Roshan Johnson were the guys that mainly got the roles in between there when Foreman got out. He actually did get there. If you played Foreman, he scored a touchdown, which is good, but did actually get injured again there. So We could probably move into the takeaways
One
unless you got something else to add here.
One thing I wanted to add, you did come clutch this week. I'm not going to lie. Deontay Foreman did score that early touchdown, but sitting him for Zach Charbonnet ended up being the correct play. So big shout out for you there.
Was that one of our things? One of our bets?
No, it was for my own home league. I'm like,
oh,
last
nice.
second, I'm
okay,
like,
yeah, I'd love to see that. All right, so let's get into the takeaways again. We're pretty late into the season now, so a lot of these takeaways are going to be more big picture, some fantasy stuff involved, but a lot more just like, what are we thinking about from like a dynasty perspective and that kind of thing. This one, I'm glad you put this as the first takeaway because it is absolutely the biggest takeaway of this week for me. Kenny Pickett, not that guy, pal, is what you have written here.
Yeah, not that guy, pal. 3.78 yards per pass attempt on the 28 passes he had. That's like absolute bottom of the barrel backup quarterback numbers, realistically. Against a backup quarterback on the other side, the Browns are starting DTR, who didn't have a good game in his own right, and you go out and you lose 13-10 in a pivotal game for your playoff hopes. The Steelers win that game. They're almost a lock to make the playoffs. Now it's the fact that they're 6-4. The AFC is a little bit more competitive now. Obviously, you lose the Bengals, but the Broncos are in the limelight. The Bills look like they started to figure a lot of things out in that game against the Jets. Like, if the Steelers don't make the playoffs, they are looking at this game in that pivotal matchup against the Browns, potentially with an opportunity to knock out the Browns, and Kenny Pickett didn't deliver. And I actually have a couple stats here for Kenny Pickett. So the first one, Steelers have scored one offensive touchdown or less in 50% of their games this season. Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett duo might be the worst long-term OC quarterback combo in franchise history. Kenny Pickett has 1,722 passing yards in 10 games. If you equate that out, that's about 172.2 passing yards per game. He only has 392 yards in his last 3 games, and the team's put up 53 total points. This offense is ugly. Kenny Pickett isn't playing well. Obviously, we know the issues with Matt Canada. If you're not fielding a competitive offense, like, it doesn't matter how good your defense is. They'll be in the mix because they have great coaching from Tomlin and a great defense, but like, they're the biggest one and done. Like, they're going to be the 17 and get annihilated by the Ravens.
They're not going to make the playoffs. I'm going to call that right now. That is not going to happen because I have 2 more things to add to you. So Ben Solak over at The Ringer tweeted out a clip of Kenny Pickett's throws beyond the sticks. Care to guess how many of those came in the first half of the game?
One.
He threw 1 pass beyond the sticks in the first half of that game. And every pass that he threw, you can go watch the clip on Ben's Twitter, nowhere near his intended receiver, leading receivers out of bounds, missed throws, throwaways. Like, this guy is the worst quarterback in the league. And I say that worse than Zach Wilson. You put Zach Wilson in this position, he would be a better quarterback. This is a significantly better offensive line than what Zach Wilson is dealing with. Dude, Kenny Pickett, his career touchdown percentage, it's the only one in NFL history among quarterbacks above 500 pass attempts, under 2%.
I think I saw a stat that Tommy DeVito has more 2+ touchdown games.
He does, in fact. And he started,
Pickett.
4 games? And he's an undrafted free agent who lives at his mom's house?
I talked about a takeaway that this DeVito-led Giants offense would be horrendous and the worst thing I've ever seen literally 2 weeks ago. I got to give him credit to his degree. He played a lot better, and that might just be
it's Washington. They suck on defense, but still, you did it. You did it. You looked better than you were supposed to.
Pickett hasn't.
Dude, you put Pickett against the Washington defense. They're still dropping 16 points, and Jalen Warren's 75-yard touchdown or whatever they had against the Browns was like literally their only offense.
Question I have for you: what is the solution if you're a Steelers fan? Like, what is the solution for Pittsburgh at quarterback moving forward? Like, are you going after potentially Fields, Kyler if the Cardinals get a high pick? Like, what are you doing at quarterback?
They strike me as the type of team that is very much in, like, we tried the young guy approach. We're going to go after a veteran. I think that's what they would consider doing. Ryan Tannehill comes to mind, Kyler Murray potentially, Jimmy Garoppolo potentially. Like, I think that would be the route that they would go. Could they also, if they really bottom out here and finish with the 14th pick in the draft or something, could they move up during the draft and get a Michael Penix or get a, JJ McCarthy or somebody like that? I think they could go a number of different routes, but reasonably, like, you can't go into next season with Kenny Pickett as the starting quarterback and not even I still think it would even be a mistake to have like a Jacoby Brissett backup type. Like, you need a legit quarterback next year. Like, Kenny Pickett should be your backup quarterback next year.
Question I have for you: if Jacoby Brissett was the starting quarterback for the Steelers, how many games would they win right now?
I don't think they would be all that much better record-wise because they've been, winning games and stuff. But I think the watchability of this team would be much different.
It'd be interesting. I mean, you wonder why. I mean, we call this guy a knucklehead all we want, but there's a reason why George Pickens is upset. He's getting open and fucking Kenny
Well,
Pickett can't
Deontay
hit spots out
Johnson's
of a barn.
tweeting at people too because
Yeah.
somebody was trying to say that he was running the wrong route or whatever, and he's like
Saw that.
literally searching for likes. I ran the right route or something like that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, not a good situation overall. Najee Harris at his locker room interview was like, somebody asked him like, "This team's 6-4. Why so down?" Basically, he's like, "That is not going to last." Basically, he was like very blunt. He's like, "We're getting lucky here." So he didn't say that exactly, but this team is not a 6-4 football team. This is the NFL. Eventually, that shit's going to correct itself, is what I believe he said.
I mean, we all kind of knew it, but kudos to him for being honest on that, man. Because like,
Najee Harris, the personality is very enjoyable. The football player, not so much.
Not
But
very,
the personality, I'd actually love to have Najee Harris in my locker room, to be honest.
yeah.
But we can move on to the next take here, which is rookie pass catchers, man. And I'm like, so me and Matt Harmon did a video on the entire rookie wide receiver class. So if you guys want to check that out, it dropped on Saturday. Maybe you missed it if you were, doing stuff this weekend. Definitely go back and look at that. We went through the entire wide receiver class. We can go through these one by one. And also this Friday, somebody dropped a comment on that video and said, we need some buy, sell, hold advice for this entire rookie class, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. So I'm definitely going to do that for you guys before the Black Friday game on Friday morning. But let's just go through some of the big highlights so far. I mean, Quentin Johnston is comically bad. I tweeted that during the game after that drop. Like, how are we going to really get on Justin Herbert at this point when Keenan Allen's taking shots off the chest and Quentin Johnston is dropping passes that would have gotten them into field goal range to at least tie the game?
Oh, we'll touch specifically on the Chargers offense later as one of the points. I literally have listed here. Chargers O is cooked. You guys will see that in a second, but it's ugly, man. Like, you need your first round receiver to go make that catch, to go win the game on that play. It's mind-boggling because he creates the separation. He gets open on the play, and he's got no hands. And it's like Mike Williams, maybe he doesn't create that type of separation, but I can best believe that he's going up, high pointing the football, landing on his fucking head, and being out for the game. Like, I can guarantee
probably.
You that.
Yeah, he probably catches the pass. I mean, even Josh Palmer probably comes down with that as well.
Oh yeah,
if he can ever get deep on a deep route pattern. But yeah, dude, Quentin Johnston. I'm starting to like. You guys know if you followed us like during the draft season that like. One thing that I really stress when it comes to like scouting prospects is you need to have recess traits, basically, which is if we were playing football at recess, get open, catch the ball, and do something with it. Yeah. Quentin Johnston with the ball in his hand can do something with it. It's the getting open and catching it part, but that's 2/3 of the equation. Like, that is a big deal, the fact that he can't do that. And if you look at the prototype, who was the best in this class at simply getting open, catching the ball, and doing something with it, who was that? Josh Downs? Probably. Zay Flowers? Like, these are the guys that are really performing their rookie seasons. Tank Dell as well. Like, those guys are all performing at a high level. And Quentin Johnston's, upside doesn't look so tantalizing anymore when he's not an NFL caliber receiver, at least at this point in time. Am I ready to give up on him? Not entirely, but would I take a random second round pick now for Quentin Johnston? Absolutely.
Harpy, it's kind of gotten to the point where you missed the selling window. Like, you missed the selling window where people were still high on him, the first round profile. Like, if you wanted to sell him, you probably should have sold him.
I sold him after Mike Williams went down. That's when I sold him, and I'm glad I did it because it could have worked out against me, but I had seen enough of Quentin Johnston, even at that very, very small point of week 3 or week 4 or whatever it was. I'm like, dude, this guy is more than just a coin flip at this point. It's way more likely this guy misses than hits.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking maybe a 25% chance of hitting, if that at this point. Like, it's getting
I think it was 25% then. I think it's 10% now.
It might be close to Jalen Reagor territory soon. Next receiver we could talk about, Puka Nacua back on track. Kind of alluded to it a little bit, but we really saw him feel comfortable in the offense. Stafford was really looking to him on his reads, and Puka Nacua looked like the only real sign of life that passing attack had after Cooper Kupp got hurt in that game. Do I think the Rams are going to be, this all-time juggernaut moving forward? No. Like, they have their struggles. They're probably going to win about 7 to 10 games, maybe 7 to 9 games. But could they fight for the 7th seed and Puka Nacua keep continuing to produce? Absolutely, especially with Cooper Kupp now dealing with that ankle injury. Even when he was on the field, Puka Nacua was playing well, but especially when Cooper Kupp is off the field, we saw those splits in the early season portion, 10, 11, 12, 13 target games. Cooper Kupp misses any time. I think Puka Nacua has to be considered a top 12 wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much summed it up there. Other rookie pass catchers, I mean, Dalton Kincaid is the piece that this Bills, like, even in these games where the Bills offense hasn't looked the greatest and they've been turning the ball over and stuff, Dalton Kincaid has been a huge bright spot for them. He has been the guy that they needed to move the chains, because Stephon Diggs, we know he's obviously a reliable target, and if Josh Allen needs to get a first down, he can get it to Stephon Diggs. But Josh Allen throwing outside the number sometimes can result in bad decisions, and Dalton Kincaid is the easy over the middle target. And I'm so glad I traded for him a couple weeks ago. I traded away Kyle Pitts and Kyler Murray for Dalton Kincaid and a bunch of fab. A lot of people didn't like that trade. It was a projection. It could have failed miserably if Kyler Murray came back. And Kyler Murray's a good option going forward. But I had Josh Allen already, which made that trade even more attractive because I have now the Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid stack.
Yeah, no, it's a similar case to me. I was able to trade. So the person that was last in the league needed to get away from some bye weeks. Dalton Kincaid and Puka Nacua were already like they had their bye week left at the time I made the deal. So I was able to acquire Puka Nacua and Dalton Kincaid in exchange for Amari Cooper, Antonio Gibson, and Sam Laporta. Antonio Gibson now dealing with that toe injury. Amari Cooper now dealing with the loss of Deshaun Watson. So it's aged very well for me. My team's making a playoff push. We're at 5-6 right now, but we're second in points for in the league. And I do have also the Josh Allen, Dalton Kincaid, Stephon Diggs, and Khalil Shakir stack. So I'm basically just all in on this Bills offense moving forward.
Yeah, and I mean, you have listed here Addison down game, not really all that worried. I actually do think, based on my conversation with Harmon especially, Jordan Addison will be better when Justin Jefferson is on the field. That's just a stone cold fact. Like, he's not ready, at least at this point in time, to be a number one receiver who wins on the outside against press coverage all the time. It was a problem for him at USC. It's been a problem for him in the NFL. And even though he has the big play upside, he can get open on especially like short in breaking routes and like out breaking patterns and stuff. He's a good receiver. He needs an alpha there. And it's why a lot of people thought, if Jordan Addison is one of the best receivers in this class, maybe this receiver class in 2023 wasn't the greatest in the world. And we're seeing some of these guys perform really well, but nobody's like Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave or, Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or anything like that.
Question I have for you. I mean, we're projecting a little bit forward looking at, the 2024 draft class, but like under here, obviously you're taking the top two, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors. Are you taking Keon Coleman versus these wide receivers? Are you taking
not Keon Coleman? No, I'm.
Well, how deep are you going?
I'm lower on Keon Coleman, generally speaking. I could say that you could make the argument that Romo Dunze, Xavier Worthy, and I mean Igbuka's having.
I would take Coleman over Worthy.
But
I'd take Coleman over.
I would not. I would not. Fair. Xavier Worthy is a much better receiver than Keon Coleman, in my opinion.
I don't know. We'll see. But regardless, like it's going to be a good class.
The one guy that we need to talk about in regards to this 2023 wide receiver class is Jackson Smith-Njigba, because he was considered the best receiver coming into the class. And obviously, he doesn't go to an ideal situation in terms of how much he can make an impact early, because he has two, former All-Pro, Pro Bowl caliber receivers on his team. But at the same time, knowing what we know after 10 weeks of the season, where does he rank in this wide receiver class? I put out a poll earlier today saying, how many rookie wide receivers would you take over Jackson Smith-Njigba in this class? And I could say comfortably, JSN is not the first receiver anymore at the very least. Even if you're a staunch JSN, defender, the poll right now is, I put it, how many of these rookie wide receivers are you taking? I listed specifically Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers, Puka Nacua, Tank Dell, and Josh Downs, because in my opinion, those guys have been the best so far. And then also, Jaden Reed, Quentin Johnson, Rashee Rice, like other guys there. Where would you rank JSN among that group? The poll says wide receiver 1 to 2 is 27% of the votes. Wide receiver 3 to 4 is 56% of the votes. So people are mainly, I guess, saying after Addison and Nacua and Flowers, he's probably in that range, give or take. Wide receiver 5 or lower, meaning he'd be after Dell and Downs potentially, with 16.5% of the votes. I can tell you right now, I would 100% take Tank Dell over Jackson Smith-Njigba in Dynasty.
That's going to be a big adjustment for me in my rankings. Tank Dell has to be a top 20 Dynasty wide receiver. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I kind of alluded to it a couple weeks ago. I said, like, listen, if Tank Dell keeps playing the way he has been, like, there's a real possibility he's a top 20 wide receiver. There's a real possibility he's ahead of Nico Collins. And at the time, it was kind of like, out there because Nico, had that fresh face in the community, but he's getting absolutely peppered. We're seeing this guy produce at an elite level. I think he's averaging over like 75 yards per game right now as a rookie. Like, if he finishes with 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns and CJ Stroud wins, offensive rookie of the year, like, you're attached to that insulation and that level of talent for at least the first 4 years, and
especially for with what
probably
CJ
more.
Stroud presents as a passer too, because it's one thing to be attached to a great quarterback like Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, who are not elite level passers, but it's one thing to be attached to a guy who has Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen like effects on all of the pass catchers in his offense, which is what looks like CJ Stroud is doing, because Tank Dell was a good prospect. Don't get me wrong. Nico Collins was a breakout candidate wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. Noah Brown was a cast off. Dalton Schultz was a cast off. Like, look how much he's elevating the play of these players.
Oh, it's insane. And I mean, kudos to Noah Brown on his own right, because those 2 games, like, he looked like a much better receiver than he has throughout his career. But that also alludes to the fact that, like, CJ Stroud is making it work, man. Like, we went into this offseason, did we really expect this to be an above average pass catching group? No. People were saying, like, is this one of the
probably bottom? Among, like, the Patriots probably would have been worse. There would have been maybe another team or 2 there, but like they would have been among the league worst, bottom 5 of the league.
Yeah, no, I would agree. So, I mean, kudos to that. And I mean, that just transitions to the next point. Tank Dell and CJ Stroud are here to stay. It was an uncharacteristically high turnover game. He threw 3 interceptions. He talked about it after the game, very, very mature about it. Said, hey, listen, when Steph Curry's going through a shooting slump, does he stop shooting? So why would I stop throwing the ball down the field? Why would I lose confidence? Just because I threw 3 interceptions doesn't mean I'm going to throw 3 interceptions every game.
Also, 3 of the 4 total interceptions he has this entire season as
5,
well.
But yes, exactly.
Or 5 interceptions. Yeah, like I also really like. I'm starting to really like CJ Stroud's attitude as well. Like every interview he gives, I'm like, this guy just like knows.
He's got it, man.
Like not even just ball. Like he just knows how to think and what he's supposed to be doing in any given situation.
It's so impressive for a 22-year-old to have that type of mentality. A lot of, like, for example, I mean, Zach Wilson, sometimes we saw, like, he had a bad game. He was kind of, like, sulking, like, crying at the presser, and then you can see, like, the lack of confidence in there. CJ Stroud just says, yeah, listen, like, I threw 3 picks. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm going to keep throwing the ball down the field. I'm going to keep trusting my guys to make plays. It just happens. I made this comparison a lot, but it, like, both on the field and off the field, it really reminds me of, like, how Dak handles his business, where it's just consummate pro. The team fucking loves him. He's the leader of the locker room, and guys would literally take a bullet for him, would run through a fucking wall for him. And I'm already seeing that from CJ Stroud, that guys are willing to put their bodies on the line. Guys are willing to try to make plays because they trust that quarterback at the end of the game to go and deliver for them. So
yeah, if he's also one for a 1 on his scouting profiles too. He wanted Tank Dell, and it looks like for good reason. So yeah, I mean, Stroud too. I'm a little annoyed at myself for not being a little higher on Stroud, because I will say, like, I would say, generally speaking, we were pretty high on Stroud when it came to, like, raw, where we had him ranked in our rookie draft rankings after the draft, because we were like, he was the second pick in the draft. Like, he should be the 105 at the very least in rookie drafts. And there was a lot of leagues, people burying him all the way down 108, 109. I got him in one league at the 106. I traded for him in our Too Lazy to Set lineups league for basically a bag of biscuits.
Oh, I remember when that happened.
Spicy Hot sold me like a random first for Brock Purdy and CJ Stroud, which is absolutely been a raked over the coals type of win of a deal for me. With CJ Stroud, like, the adversity that he's gone through with, like, his whole, like, situation with his dad and all that kind of stuff. I wish I would have bought into that more, because that's something that I've bought into in the past with, like, Henry Ruggs, for example, with the whole situation with his best friend from high school and stuff. And I wish I would have seen that ability come out with how CJ Stroud played, because I will say, like, there's a lot of people out there that are, like, pretending that they were all in on CJ Stroud before the draft. Like, you guys were not. Like, stop pretending. Everybody had concerns about him when we heard the S2 stuff, even though we didn't know the validity of the test or whatever. We were concerned. Like, I was concerned that this guy with great, like, good tools, a good arm, probably a great arm, to be honest, but not great level of mobility and stuff. Like, he needed to be above the shoulders, really, really high level. And if you have something that says, hey, above the shoulders, you're not really that high of a level, it gave me, like, Josh Rosen, like, Mac Jones vibes. And I didn't like that. And that's probably an oversight on my part. But at the same time, like, that was the key thing. That would have been the make or break thing. If he didn't have it above the shoulders, he wouldn't have been a great quarterback. But it's clear that he does.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into another player in that class in a bit, but I'm going to be fully transparent. Bryce Young was my number 1. CJ Stroud was my number 2. Fantasy-wise, I had Anthony Richardson over CJ Stroud, full transparent, given the mobility. But from a scouting perspective, like, CJ Stroud was not ahead of Bryce Young for me. And Bryce Young, the way he's looked, you would take CJ Stroud over Bryce Young. You would.
Yeah.
You would. So
As much as I still think Bryce Young does have it
absolutely.
above the shoulders and will figure things out when this team gets better, I think they are doing a massive disservice to Bryce
We'll
Young if
get
they do
into
not
that.
fire Frank Reich at the end of this year as well and get a new head coach, GM situation going on in there, because the decisions they made, drafting Jonathan Mingo at the top of the second round, Adam Thielen's been a nice addition, paying
We'll
Miles
touch on
Sanders,
it.
who is in the best like running back situation I've ever seen in Philadelphia in 2022. Like, you needed to make a splash. Like, go out and get DeAndre Hopkins. Like, go out and get somebody that can really move the needle. Your offensive line was supposed to be better. And this is the same thing we've seen from Frank Reich now in two spots, where Indianapolis's offensive line was supposed to be better 2 years ago, and it wasn't. And now we're seeing Indianapolis offensive line look fine with Shane Steichen. So maybe Frank Reich's scheme is the problem.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's just transition right into it, because I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about it after. Let's just go right into it.
There's no order we have to go in with these. We'll just go off on a tangent here.
I mean, this was obviously the game of interest for me this week. Cowboys fan, 1 p.m. kickoff. I was expecting, more of a fight, to be quite honest, from the Panthers. I thought, Cowboys coming off a big emotional high, big 49-17 win against a division rival who just got a double-digit win against a different division rival. I thought, maybe the Panthers, they would play better ball, they would play competitive ball, want to prove something, but they just kind of rolled over. And my takeaway from that game is, don't get me wrong, Bryce Young has not been good, but he has no chance with the surrounding cast. Let's start with this right off the bat. Again, like, Bryce Young was my quarterback one, like I said. CJ Stroud, you're taking over and moving forward. No ifs, ands, or buts, because CJ Stroud already looks like a top 5 to 8 quarterback in the league. With Bryce Young, though, for the love of God, can we just give him a fucking chance to survive even this year? Like, that offensive line was absolutely beaten to a pulp by Micah Parsons and crew. It was so funny watching that game, because basically Dan Quinn was just like, yeah, we're going to line Micah Parsons right up over your guard, and there's nothing you can fucking do to keep this guy out of the backfield. Micah Parsons, 3 sacks in that game. Bryce Young never really got a chance to feel comfortable in the pocket, because you got 11 coming at you. You got 90 coming at you. You got all these elite pass rushers coming at you. The Panthers give up 7 sacks in that game. And if we're even looking at the perimeter talent of the Panthers, like, yes, Adam Thielen is a starting quality receiver in the NFL, but he's also 34 years old.
He should be the third best receiver on any NFL offense, to be honest.
When your number one can't stretch a defense, guess what? People are going to play you tight, and they're going to say, hey, listen, Adam Thielen, you want to catch 7-yard, 8-yard passes across the whole game while we're up, double-digit points? Go ahead, be my guest. It's like the most empty calorie offense I've ever seen. Adam Thielen's going to get his 11 targets for 75 yards, but nothing else is going to happen. Nothing else is going to materialize, because they haven't positioned themselves to a place where things can materialize. Like I said, lack of personnel on the outside. Jonathan Mingo's been a miss. Tommy Tremble was a solid blocker, but if he's your number one tight end, like, what are we doing there? Chuba Hubbard has had his glimpses, but realistically, they have a below average running
back or a committee running back at best. Like, it just pisses me off, the lack of understanding of how you want your offense to develop by drafting a guy like Jonathan Mingo. Like, because don't get me wrong, Jonathan Mingo was like a good player. If the Seahawks had drafted Jonathan Mingo in the second round with their support, like with the way their receiver core is structured, that makes way more sense. You have the guy that, came out of Ole Miss already, who developed into a great wide receiver with DK Metcalf to help mentor the guy. He's a height, weight, speed guy as well. You needed a pro-ready receiver. You should have taken Josh Downs. That's what should have happened, because Josh Downs was a way better prospect than Jonathan Mingo. And also,
played
how
in
much
Carolina.
better would this offense be with Josh Downs instead of Jonathan Mingo?
Played in Carolina as well. Played at UNC. Like
how do you not draft Josh Downs there? Like, I really don't understand. Like, you need pro-ready assets. You could have gone maybe mid-season and traded for a receiver as well. Like, they're going to have to do some work this offseason, but hopefully the damage is not already done to Bryce Young's mental health, because I think he's a physically and mentally tough quarterback. I don't think he's going to crumble and, crush under the pressure like Zach Wilson did after his first year. But at the same time, like, your best case scenario is Tua Tagovailoa. Like, you hope that's what kind of happens, or maybe a Trevor Lawrence type of career trajectory. But it also is probably equally likely that he goes down the Zach Wilson path, or goes down the Sam Darnold path, or whatever. Like, you don't want your quarterback losing all of his confidence like that. That's never a good sign, regardless of if we still believe. Like, I still believe in Bryce Young. I will be talking about it during the offseason that he's a good buy low, but I also am going to evaluate the moves the Panthers are making too. And if they're not making moves I agree with, I'm going to be like, dude, I'm nervous.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you there. I still believe in him. However, I mean, he does have a long he does have a long uphill road to be able to climb back into the good graces of the Dynasty community. I think, again, this is a very similar situation to that of Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, big-time struggles in year one, lack of personnel, lack of coaching there. Urban Meyer, grinding on some college chicks, not really focused on coaching up your young quarterback. Let's get Bryce Young a proper coach. Let's get Bryce Young, a true number one wide receiver, whether that's going after Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, someone like that this offseason. Let's give him a fighting chance to be able to see, can this guy function at the NFL level? Again, you have him for 4, potentially 5 years if you have that quarterback option there. You have to surround him with as much talent as you can to see what you have. Because you don't want to go by year 4 and not knowing what you have with Bryce Young. Because by then, if you don't know what you have with Bryce Young by year 4, you probably don't have much.
Yeah, and this is what I would do if I was in charge of the Carolina Panthers. I would fire Frank Reich's ass
Easily.
Probably before the season is even done.
He's not finishing the year. No.
I would go out and get Ben Johnson. I would go out and get Dave Canales. Go out and get somebody that can run an offense for this guy that's going to help him and not hinder him. I would go out and be aggressive as hell after T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, somebody who's a legitimate number one wide receiver. After I do that, this is a great receiver class. I'm doubling up at the top of the Emeka Egbuka. I'm taking, Troy Franklin, whatever type of receiver, Romo Dunze maybe is on the board at that point in time. So then you have Brandon Ayuk, let's say. You have Dave Canales or Ben Johnson operating this offense. You add in Egbuka or somebody like that. And then your offensive line, you probably need to add pieces to as well. And maybe draft a couple running backs late in the draft.
Do they have their second round pick? I thought they traded it.
I think they have their 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
I think they have their 2. I think it was their 25 too that they traded, not their 24 too, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, regardless. So like you kind of said, I agree. The other potential opportunity I'd be looking for, again, I don't know how much Houston is willing to pay him to stay as a coordinator, but I wouldn't mind giving Bobby Slowick a chance as their head coach there, because the way he's able to develop a young quarterback, we have the evidence there with CJ Stroud. Although, they're different stylistically, they're both accurate passers down the field. They're both playmakers in the pocket. I feel like Bobby Slowick would be the perfect answer for him, assuming Ben Johnson wants to go to greener pastures, because it's going to be tough to convince him to go to that train wreck.
I don't know, man. I don't think it's a completely unattractive job. Like, I mean, the picks are not ideal that they don't, have the draft capital to build around it, but the defense is encouraging. It's young and it's fun, and you have a young quarterback, and your offensive line, in theory, with a better scheme, should be pretty good. You just need to add some skill position. This is the fun part, right? Like the thing that you are as a GM is like, I want to go get the fun toys. I don't want to draft the defensive and offensive linemen. I want to draft the receivers, the running backs, the tight ends. Like you could have fun this year with the Carolina Panthers.
You could, but also your offensive line is a train wreck in its own.
And also, I mean, if you didn't have to trade up for a quarterback and somehow one of them fell to you, your pick right now would be in prime position to take Marvin Harrison Jr. to add to this offense, which sucks that you're not going to get that opportunity. And while we're on this game, just briefly, Tony Pollard is back. It looks like. I mean, 16 touches, 80 yards from scrimmage, finds the end zone. Finally, it looked like he was about to have another Tony Pollard situation, though, right? It looked like, there's no, like when I saw that play, I'm like, there's no way this guy isn't short right now.
I saw the flag
throw
too.
The ball to Jake Ferguson or something.
Bro, there was a flag on the play for defensive holding, and when he scores the touchdown, I just see flag, and everybody's like kind of hesitant figuring out what it was, and I'm like, defensive holding on a run call, like that is like
it's coming back. Like you knew, like you're like, dude. Tony Pollard has had no breaks this year. There's no way this play isn't coming back.
And I mean, kudos to Tony, because although like we kind of mentioned, he didn't get there against the Giants, had a couple opportunities too. He looked like a better player, and that's the ultimate goal. If you have Tony Pollard right now, is the first 9 weeks he didn't look like himself. Last 2 weeks, man, he's been breaking tackles like prime Tony Pollard. I mean, there's a stat right here. In weeks 1 to 9, Tony Pollard was only credited with forcing 8 missed tackles in the run game. Over the last 2 games, he's forced 10 missed tackles. If we're getting that prime Tony Pollard, making people miss, getting yards after contact on one of the top 5, potentially even top 3 offenses in the NFL rest of the season, man, I don't want to, I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit, because obviously, given the first 9 games, it's tough to say this, but are we shocked if Tony Pollard goes out there, has another great game against Washington, the same defense that let Saquon Barkley score 30 fantasy points against them? Are we shocked if he has a great game against the Seattle Seahawks the next Thursday? And then you got the primetime stretch where, yes, they're hard opponents with the Eagles, with the Bills, with the Lions, with the Dolphins on schedule, but those are going to be high-profile games, high-scoring game environment games. And if Tony Pollard had this bad touchdown luck stretch in that stretch between weeks 1 and 9, I wouldn't be shocked if he had 8 touchdowns in that stretch where the Cowboys are scoring 30 points per game.
Yeah, he could be a really interesting case study after the year is done of like the advance rate kind of like, because if he closed out the season strong, he'll be like Best Ball Mania wise a very difficult player to get into the dance.
Yes.
But if you got him there, maybe he's a guy that ends up winning somebody the tournament. So that could be really cool dynamic for Tony Pollard. Maybe we're going crazy here and we're like biased Cowboys fan and Tony Pollard manager right now, but I saw a lot out of what I needed to see out of Pollard, and I was like, this is the last chance, man. If he doesn't do it this week, like I'm burying his ass to RB3 range.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with everything mentioned there.
Yeah, so I'm going to rapid fire a couple of these takeaways just because I want to really spend some time on these dynasty trades. Gibbs and Montgomery, those guys can coexist as running back ones. I mean, Sam Laporta takes a little bit of a hit in terms of his workload. He's been kind of down the last 2 games, but the way that Gibbs and Montgomery are operating, there's room for both of these guys. It's very clear that this offense runs between those 2 running backs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Sam Laporta, I don't really expect him to be horrible the rest of the year, but maybe he doesn't sun run as much as he was early on in the season.
Yeah, and that's my point on it too as well. We saw when David Montgomery was out that Sam Laporta's targets took a big tick up. I mean, in the games that David Montgomery missed versus when he plays, Sam Laporta averages 3.5 targets more per game. So if David Montgomery is going to be healthy moving forward, I do think instead of the high-end tight end 1 that we expected Sam Laporta even 2 weeks ago, you probably have to dimmer that down to maybe tight end 6, tight end 7 rest of the season. He's more of in a discussion, in my opinion, with a guy like Trey McBride versus that range he was with the Hawkinsons, with the Kincaids, with, it would have been Mark Andrews, but unfortunately, Kittle, and then obviously Kelsey sitting on the top of the mountain. So agree with that. You mentioned Gibbs and Montgomery. I expect both of them to be top 12 options moving forward. Gibbs more so a mid-range type of guy, potentially even high end. The underrated thing, and I'll touch upon it as well with the Chargers, but like outside of running back 1, Christian McCaffrey, I think you can put anybody at RB2 at this point. I do. There's like 3, 4, 5 guys I think that are in that consideration. Obviously, Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is well within that discussion now. Bijan Robinson, once he gets off the bye, we saw the workload intake. At the end of the day,
Hall should be there realistically if he could get a functional quarterback game out of Zach Wilson and company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was a big takeaway. And then Dave Montgomery, I think you have to consider him in the midst of like the Joe Mixons. I probably move Pollard back into that range as well because I liked what I saw from him, like back in RB1.
Probably got to move Barkley up a little bit too from where we had him before. Agreed. After that big performance. I mean, is Saquon going to do that every single week? Probably not. There's probably going to be games where the offense looks anemic and they can't get anything going. But at the same time, he's still Saquon Barkley. He's probably going to have games where he elevates and does everything by himself pretty much, which is basically what he did this past week. He had 4 plays of over 35 yards in that game. Like he literally was just flying up the fantasy production. I feel pretty stupid for having him in the RB2 range or whatever, low end RB2 range where I had him in the RB tier list. This one's really fun. Niners offense. So in our Tone Setters League, do you know who my players are that I have from this offense?
You have all of them, no?
I have all of them. Yes. I have Christian McCaffrey. I have Brock Purdy. I have Brandon Ayuk, and I have George Kittle. Those guys combined for 110 points this week between the 4 of them. And that is an absolutely absurd stat line. I think I dropped 206 points on the week or whatever. The offense has been really good outside of that middling stretch where they played a couple tough defenses. The Vikings, as we know, are we thought they were a bad defense, but they actually are a pretty good defense. The Cleveland Browns are a tough defense, and Purdy struggled against them. Plus, we had the whole concussion situation in between there with Brock Purdy, and he wasn't playing well because of that. But I'm really excited about this Niners offense down the stretch, and I think they're probably going to win people some leagues. Whether you have Ayuk, whether you have Kittle, whether you have Christian McCaffrey, whether you have Brock Purdy, they're all every week starters, realistically. The only guy that hasn't been getting there is Deebo Samuel, and it's mainly because Ayuk takes away the wide receiver 1 work, and Christian McCaffrey takes away the RB1 work. So it's tough for Deebo to get there in either of those avenues like we saw a couple years ago when Deebo was basically their RB1 on their team because they didn't have McCaffrey, and Ayuk was having a bit of a down stretch to start the season. So Deebo's the one guy that's kind of a loser from this situation.
Yeah, no, I would agree there. I mean, we saw just in this game alone, CMC 103 yards from scrimmage, touchdown on 26 opportunities. Again, like I said, he is the clear RB1 in fantasy football.
Yeah,
and I do feel kind of silly looking back with everything that I said about him because, I mean, realistically, you have to redraft today. I think you can make the case that he would go first overall. Simply
I would
because
pick him
the running
first.
back,
I would pick him first if we had
the running back
today.
landscape is just so bad to the point where if you have Christian McCaffrey, you're good at running back. If you don't have Christian McCaffrey, you're probably struggling at running back.
Yeah, and it's a value above replacement like game, fantasy football. That's how it works. And if the value above replacement of Christian McCaffrey to your Ecklers and Bijans and, you know, those type of guys in the Jonathan Taylor, those type of guys in the running back landscape is that much better, then he is more valuable than Tyreek Hill. As good as Tyreek Hill is, is not as much of an advantage over the rest of the top end wide receivers.
Well, I've mentioned to you, even in the past, for projecting to 2024 mock drafts, like there's probably 6 or 7 wide receivers in the first 9 picks. So the fact that Christian McCaffrey stands with them from a point per game perspective, I mean, it's just, you're looking at wide receiver. There's so many more guys that you can get. With running back, you're projecting a lot moving forward. So,
and what did I say in the running back age and touch apex? Who are the guys that break the
Hall of Famers?
Hall of Famers. And that's what Christian McCaffrey is. So that's going to happen. He's literally an 1,000 guy. He's been a multi-time All-Pro. He's probably first team All-Pro this season. Like, I'm not doubting him anymore. I don't care if he's a top 5 pick next year in fantasy redraft leagues. I'm not going to talk about how he's old and he could get injured because yes, that could happen. And I'm sure that's a factor of why he could be a risky pick. But if he doesn't get injured, which it looks like the 49ers, like I've said often about the Eagles and DeAndre Swift, are managing his workload quite well, then I'm not going to doubt the guy anymore. It's just not going to happen. So a couple other takeaways. Let's just go rapid fire on the Commanders offense. With Jameis Winston, Sam Howell, whatever you want to call him. He's the same quarterback. 3 fumbles from the skill group. Definitely not ideal. Double-digit loss against probably the worst offense in the league with Tommy DeVito there. Somehow got swept by the Giants as well. And then now you get a meeting against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Like this season's going to be over for the Commanders. One thing I really worry about, because I have a lot of Sam Howell bags in Dynasty, is if this team is going to be really bad and picking really high, that's not good for my Sam Howell bags, because I believe that Sam Howell has played well enough to be the quarterback of this team next year. But if they're picking 7th in the draft, are they going to believe that? I don't know.
That's the tricky aspect with Sam Howell. And that's why I think the comparison to Winston is very true, because we saw in that 2019 season, Jameis Winston was throwing the ball a shit ton, threw over 30 touchdowns. I think he was like the quarterback 2 in fantasy that year. Didn't stop the Bucks from going out and getting Tom Brady.
And maybe there's not a Tom Brady-like option available for the Washington Commanders, whether it's a rookie or a veteran. But
you bring him back?
I can tell you right now, Sam Howell's job security question marks probably not going anywhere unless he absolutely cooks the rest of the season.
Hear me out. New ownership. Do they looking to bring in Cousins back?
Oh God, I don't know, dude. Either way, all I know is that if Sam Howell, if you said crystal ball, Sam Howell's the quarterback 1, and he's going to be the quarterback 1 of the Commanders for the next 3 to 4 years, we're probably taking this guy in the 3rd round of dynasty startups, man. Like he is really good from a fantasy perspective. The problem is he might get himself benched or replaced at some point if he continues to turn the ball over like this.
Yeah, and I mean, this is why the perfect example of like these type of volatile quarterbacks that are giving him immediate production. Him, Josh,
they're great trade targets for contending teams.
Well, I think they're great trade up opportunities. If you have them on your roster, can you go and use them to get liquid assets? I think, like, for example, the Josh Dobbs discourse 2 weeks ago or even last week was crazy because, I mean, we were talking about Josh Dobbs. Like, could you go out and get Josh Dobbs plus to go up for Dak? Could you use Josh Dobbs plus?
The one I saw a lot was Brock Purdy, because Purdy was coming off of a couple bad games and everybody was like, oh, dude, I would rather have Josh Dobbs than Brock Purdy in Dynasty. I'm like, are you guys stunned? This guy's like 30 years old, and Brock Purdy has had like 2 bad games, and there was literal MVP discussions a couple of weeks ago before that about Brock Purdy. So Sam Howell is going to be an interesting case study for dynasty purposes. Let's just put it that way, because he is going to be a contentious subject. And I would highly suggest you maybe try and move off of him. I did it in one league. In our no flocking league before the season started, I traded Sam Howell and Dameon Pierce for CJ Stroud, which is a complete joke of a trade.
I criticized it at the time, and it's aged even worse than I could have imagined.
Yeah, and Howell has actually not been the problem in that trade. Like, realistically, like Sam Howell's value now is higher than it was at the beginning of the season, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, it's just a matter of fact that the 2nd overall pick is playing like a 1st overall pick.
Literally,
more than
it's been crazy. So, I mean, we touched on the Chargers offense. We don't really need to rehash that.
I want to talk
Austin
about
Eckler's
one point.
Not really been great as a runner, and that's been a problem.
That's what I'm worried about, dude. He had that 140-yard run where it literally looked like they slowed down the video. He does not have that same juice that we saw Prime Eckler have. And if this offense isn't projecting like we thought it would going forward because of the lack of wide receiver talent, because of the coaching complex there, I mean, the play sequencing from Kellen Moore at times is really hard to watch. Obviously, Brandon Staley, crucial, like bad decisions in clutch time. Like, I'm starting to get worried about this Chargers offense. Obviously, Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert are going to be the constants, but Austin Eckler, if he's not getting the same inside the 5 work he was with the prime Chargers offense, and if he's not the same efficient player he was in that stretch where he was the RB1, RB2 in fantasy, I think he projects more of a mid-range running back 1 rest of the season than the RB2 consensus that a lot of people will have him at. I'm honestly considering moving Jahmyr Gibbs over him. Like, good offense, elite player.
It's tough with Eckler because we know what he can. Like, as bad as some of the games he's had this year, he's also had a lot of really good games. And it's mainly on the back of the fact that this guy literally gets like 6, 7, 8 targets a game. So it's hard not to just he's like Alvin Kamara on crack. He just gets like so much receiving work that it's hard not to just leave him all the way up there where he's being ranked. I'm probably not going to react too much to what I saw from Austin Eckler because I think he just gets the volume and the high leverage touches to the point that, yeah, if you wanted to take Jahmyr Gibbs over him because he's definitely a better football player at this point in time. But at the same time, because he shares a backfield, he's probably not going to be as consistent for fantasy, even though the Lions seem to be very well intent on basically giving all their high value work to their 2 running backs.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. And I do like the Kamara comparison because it is very true. He gets peppered in the receiving game, but is not the efficient rusher he once was, which is pretty crazy because, I mean, he didn't really show any signs of, wearing down last year. But like you're going to mention, that's the reason why there's a touch and running back age and touch apex. Because guess what? It happens dramatically. It's not just like this flat line where you can see the incremental downgrade. Sometimes you'll see that with guys like Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, where they'll incrementally get worse and worse and worse and less efficient. Some guys, man, they're like on the mountain and then it's just right away.
Aaron Jones also a good example. I mean, it's been injury related for him, but even like when he's been on the field, he hasn't been overly efficient. So those are the main takeaways. Let's get into the dynasty trades here. We got a lot of dynasty discussions that I think are going to be really interesting as the season goes towards the end, because a lot of you, and I hope you guys don't play in leagues that have dynasty trade deadlines, because I'm adamantly against them, because I think if you're in the championship, you should be able to make a trade for a player to like a rebuilding roster or whatever, because dynasty is not redraft. There's long-term benefits of these trades for the team that's the rebuilding team. So we'll talk about a lot of these players, and a lot of these players are very contentious topics on the dynasty market right now. So I'll let you get into whatever you got first, though.
I just wanted to say real quick, by the way, if you are a member of Flock, that'll actually be a discussion, a topic for Dynasty 101 upcoming this week. We will be talking about in-season trading from a dynasty lens, how advantageous it is, what type of perspective you are. Are you a contender? Are you a rebuilder? Are you in house money? Like, how should you approach certain situations? And also touching upon a little bit of the aspect of why there shouldn't be a trade deadline in dynasty leagues, because the arms race in dynasty is what makes dynasty separate from redraft. If you have extra assets to throw at needle moving league winning assets, you shouldn't be held away from that ability. So I'm not going to go too specific, but if a guy like Christian McCaffrey becomes available and you have the assets to be able to offer for him, you shouldn't be limited to a week 13 deadline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If you wanted Christian McCaffrey, you should have built up more assets. That's literally the way I look at it. And it sucks to suck, basically. Yeah. If somebody has 3 extra first-round picks and they send 2 of them away for Christian McCaffrey, you might lose your league now because of it. And that also should be taken into account when you build out like barely a contender, because, if the true contenders have a lot of extra assets on top of their already great teams, that needs to factor into the fact that not only are you not a top 3 team maybe in your league, you might also be like really not top 3, because the best teams have all the assets as well. So let's get into some of these trades here. Tano was the first one that we talked about here. And also, last point on the Dynasty 101, going forward, we will have an exclusive Flock only video every single week, so that I know you guys probably want more of us video content wise, so that will be an exclusive Flock only thing. So if you're on the fence right now, you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to sign up on the site. A lot of cool tools coming. Dynasty Trade Calculator coming. Trade Calculator coming very soon, and also a new exclusive bonus video on maybe it's a Dynasty 101 topic, maybe it's prospect talk, maybe it's whatever. And all that kind of stuff will be coming this year. So Tano's trade here, he has listed a 1 quarterback league, house money year, early 2024 second is the pick valuation of the second that he gave away. The mid to late pick is the 2025 second that he gave away as well. And he has here listed that he still has a late 2024 first and 2025 first, one early, one late. So this trade basically is, he's a house money team. He realizes his team is starting to compete, goes after some productive assets. Unfortunately, Cooper Kupp is now injured. It's been announced as a low ankle sprain. It's probably not going to be a long-term injury, but he does have listed here his wide receiver core is very young. Addison, JSN, London, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Zay Flowers, running backs, Bijan, Jacobs, Hall, like relatively a young team. So at face value, let's look at this trade. For me, DK Metcalf and Cooper Kupp, if you're in a competitive window, I think Cooper Kupp is more valuable personally. And I think, honestly, that shouldn't even be like a hot take.
At the bare minimum, they should be equating in value. So let's just say, for instance, even if you wanted to equate them and knock them each off of the deal, then you're looking at Eckler in a third for Shakir in 2 seconds. Yeah, early second does hurt, but is a one quarterback league, so that is diluted a certain bit. You still have draft capital, like you kind of mentioned, with the first, including one early, one late, I believe it says here. So, yeah, you still have, a bunch of liquidity on this team to be able to add to it in your true competitive window next year. If your house money team is telling you that you can compete this year, go compete this year. Yes, Cooper Kupp may miss a week or possibly 2 weeks with that low ankle sprain, but when he comes back, you're still expecting him to be bare minimum top 15 wide receiver. Although, like I mentioned, I voiced some concerns about the long-term appeal and even the RB2 overall status of Austin Eckler this year. Like, don't get it twisted. He's still going to be a top 5 running back. So if you're ready to compete and Eckler's giving you 18, 19 PPR points per game, Cooper Kupp, same type of deal when he comes back, go buy some production. I don't mind this at all.
Yeah, this is essentially, you gave away DK Metcalf for Cooper Kupp, Khalil Shakir in the third cancel each other out, and you gave up 2 second-round picks for Austin Eckler in a one quarterback league. So yeah, like the move there, definitely makes some sense. These are, a lot of people are really hasty when it comes to house money teams. We bring up that concept all the time, and we're like, hey, let your team develop, see how good it's going to be. But you only want to strike when you need to. You don't need to, like, if you don't ever need to add a piece to your team in a house money window, don't. Like, if your team just develops and everything breaks right, you don't need to add anybody. But if you're in a position where you're like, I'm 7-3 in a house money team with a bunch of first rounders in the bank, then you can go out and make a move that helps your team out. And the next trade that we have here is from Austin here, a 10-team league. So you guys can see the trade on the screen there.
Wow.
He ends up selling off the Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase stack. So very, very hefty assets that we're talking about here. It's a 10-team super flex. So, studs are going to be really valuable in this type of league format. He says he's currently sitting in second place with a win now roster. He only had 2 quarterbacks rostered, Allen and Burrow, in a 10-team league. The first round pick will be 102 or 103 in 2024. So that's a key distinction, that knowing that that first rounder is going to be early. He said, I probably lost the deal overall, but he needed a quarterback to finish out the year.
I love this move
with you, dude. I don't even think you lost this.
I don't think he lost it at all, because if we're equating it right now, I think even if you slightly prefer Jamar Chase to the prospect of Marvin Harrison Jr., what's the distinction there? At worst, you're thinking Marvin plus Kirk, and that's even downgrading the fact that Marvin Harrison is going to be a top 5 overall pick, and at minimum, the wide receiver 3 in Dynasty. There's a real possibility he might even be valued above Jamar Chase in Dynasty entering his rookie season. Not to mention, if that ends up being Drake May, you automatically get another quarterback asset that you can flip for top 8 overall startup type of value. Trevor Lawrence at this point, I think with Joe Burrow's injury and Trevor Lawrence playing still, I think you got to say that at minimum, they're equatable value from a Dynasty
Add in Marquise to balance it out is the way I look at it.
Adding Marquise, sure. And then you're just getting more win now assets for you. So you're moving off an asset that you can't use in a competitive window, second place win now roster. This is the perfect move. And these are the type of moves we will get into. I might even put this trade in the video that we're going to be talking about for Flock, because I think this is excellent, man. This is exactly the type of move you should be making if you lose a Joe Burrow. Not going after an illiquid asset to try to compete now, like, say, Jared Goff plus a first-round pick. No, you need a quarterback that you can trust that will be a top 12 valued asset next year if you're going to move off a guy like Joe Burrow. And I think this move equates to that perfectly.
Yeah, the tough thing too about like selling low, quote unquote, on a guy like Joe Burrow is
low Burrow,
that you also inherently buy low on Trevor Lawrence here. Like, you're not selling Joe Burrow for CJ Stroud, who's on the up right now, right? Like, it's difficult to sell low on somebody and then buy high on somebody else. So sometimes you have to take on some inherent risk. Yeah, Marvin Harrison versus Jamar Chase, Jamar Chase is the safer projection because we've seen him in the NFL and we've seen him have multiple fantasy seasons above, 16, 18 points per game. But Marvin Harrison, if he works out and that risk pays off, will be 100% more valuable than Jamar Chase by midseason of his rookie year. Like that's going to happen if that's what happens here. And also, like you said, I mean, it's a 10-team super flex, so Marvin actually might be the locked in like 102 for sure, because a guy like Drake May is not quite as valuable in a 10-team super flex as he would be in a 12-team. But regardless, I think Christian Kirk and Marquise Brown, both really good projections rest of season, which is important if you're trying to win the championship and you're in second place. So yeah, textbook, win now type of trade here.
Yeah, love the structure of that. Love the proactiveness. You noticed that you lost Burrow. You knew that you were in second place. So you struck while the iron was hot. Because realistically, I mean, the more content that's going to be put out about how you should be flipping Joe Burrow for even more depressed costs and more depressed costs and more depressed costs, the fact that you got that type of high-end market value right now is excellent.
Yeah, I mean, there's a world where if Trevor Lawrence closes out the season strong, he's more valuable than Joe Burrow by himself in Dynasty. Yes. Like that, yes. It's possible. Like, especially what we saw this week. That was his best week of his season so far, and it just so happened that Zay Jones is the missing piece of this offense, which I've talked about for like 12 weeks. It feels like. TK is the next trade that we have on the screen here, and a lot of very contentious Dynasty subjects involved in this trade, because we could have a whole 10-minute segment on Tank Dell, 10-minute segment on Will Levis and Deshaun Watson and some of these guys. So he says it's a 12-team superflex PPR start 9. He is a contender, and Watson was his quarterback 3. He's worried about Watson, as am I, in a lot of leagues.
Yes.
And he wanted to offload the prospect of Deshaun Watson. So essentially what we have here is you go from Watson to Levis, which I don't know. Where do you stand on that straight up? Watson or Levis? Which one would you prefer?
I think at minimum they are,
especially knowing it's your quarterback 3 as well.
I think at minimum they are same tier. And if you're worried about Deshaun Watson, I don't mind the take of preferring Will Levis. So I think at worst case here, if you're lower on Deshaun Watson, you cancel them out in this deal. So let's just say Levis and Watson aren't involved. Then you're looking at Tank Dell in a third for Marquise Brown, Tank Bigsby, and 20 Fab. Oddly enough, by the way, both Tanks being involved in this deal is pretty fucking ironic. But I would rather have Tank Dell in a third than Marquise Brown, Tank Bigsby, and 20 Fab. At this rate, Tank Bigsby is arguably one of the worst running backs in the NFL, objectively. Well, regardless of what you thought about him as a prospect, as soon as he put the pads on for the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's been objectively one of the worst running backs in the NFL. I would take the 3rd round pick over him. So for ease sake, let's just say the 3rd equal Tank Bigsby. I'm taking Tank Dell over Marquise Brown and 20 Fab. Marquise Brown is older. Marquise Brown is producing less production, and he doesn't have the long-term insulation of being attached to CJ Stroud. So I really, really like your side on this deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tank Dell is almost just like a younger version of Marquise Brown. So you're kind of just getting and pocketing a guy that's been really, really productive as well. And the other underrated part of this is he does say he's in second place, right? So Will Levis as his quarterback 3 is going to have value to his second place team because he can actually use Will Levis, unlike Deshaun Watson, because he's out for the year. So that's an underrated part of this. And this is, again, another good example of buying contending assets, because you bought Tank Dell and Will Levis, who are not your prototype contending assets. They're young players. So you didn't really sacrifice any longevity. And in fact, I think you offloaded a lot of risk too, because Deshaun Watson has the ability, and so does Will Levis to some degree, to be not very valuable a year from now. Like, it's possible Deshaun Watson is all the way buried down in, Russell Wilson territory from this past offseason, where like that's basically what we were talking about. And honestly, like, you can make the argument Russell Wilson's more valuable than Deshaun Watson with the way that he's playing right now. So it's an interesting trade for sure. A lot of guys that are like going to be hotly debated Dynasty subjects this offseason: Tank Dell, Deshaun Watson, Will Levis, like all of those guys are going to be really, really debatable, which is why I wanted to include this trade, because there's a lot of risk and a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, I really like that deal. Really good discussion point, but I think we can move on to the next deal, because there's another pretty good discussion point. At what point are we going to be putting CeeDee Lamb into that top tier? Because I think we've talked about it multiple times, myself and you. Like, I think there's a real possibility that this separation between CeeDee Lamb and the top 2 wide receivers is as little as it's ever been in their careers.
Yeah, this trade is really, really interesting to talk about, because based on my conversation with Matt Harmon, Zay Flowers is his wide receiver 1 from this class, like higher than Nakua, higher than Jordan Addison. So he values him as like a top 15 to 20 dynasty wide receiver. CeeDee Lamb, like you said, has maybe taken that ascension all the way into the Jamar Chase territory, or at the very least, he's worth 2 first-rounders, maybe plus, on the open market. This trade really comes down to, what do you think of Jackson Smith-Njigba? Because if you're a staunch Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to figure it out, he's in a bad situation. He's got a lot of great receivers ahead of him on the depth chart. And for what it's worth, this past week, there was splash plays with Jackson Smith-Njigba, which we haven't seen. He's mainly been like a low average depth of target guy. Yeah. And I wanted to see, like, he had a near catch. I think it got called back, but he had one on the sideline where he had like his feet in. He's had some downfield plays that have been exciting. And this is also a 10-team league. So that 2025 first is guaranteed a top 10 pick that you receive as well. But it also upgrades CeeDee Lamb because he's a stud asset. So this one's like a really interesting discussion. The 2025 class is not as good as the 2024 class. And I know we do the thing every year. We're like, oh my God, just wait till next year's class. I promise you, we will not be doing
CeeDee
that
Lamb
in 2025.
I'm taking CeeDee Lamb. Like, the thing is you have depth at wide receiver with JSN, Flowers, Devontae, London, Deontay, et cetera, that are sure. But in a 10-team start 10 league, give me the elite asset. And I think CeeDee Lamb, if you had that true alpha wide receiver one in this core, like, yeah, you wouldn't have JSN and Flowers, but then you're looking at Lamb, Devontae, London, Deontay, like, that's more than enough wide receiver depth, in my opinion. CeeDee Lamb is that elite difference maker. He's on pace for over 1,700 yards this year, attached to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL. Like, I think there's going to be a real conversation here. If CeeDee Lamb, again, has 1,800 yards, is like a top 3 player candidacy-wise for Offensive Player of the Year, we're going to have to start having the conversation of where he belongs in that list. Because I think there's a case that with Joe Burrow out, him versus Jamar Chase is not all that different, man. If you were to substitute Jamar Chase's name in this deal, what would your reaction be?
Yeah, that's a fair discussion point. Like, because I probably... Again, it really all depends what you think of JSN. Because if you're like not worried about JSN, I think this is probably a good deal for him, where he's acquiring 2 really good dart throws at potentially future elite fantasy wide receivers in Dynasty, and then also banking a first-round pick, which makes it better process to do that because you're taking a risk on JSN and Zay Flowers. At least you insulated yourself with the one, which is what I think it's generally a good deal for both teams, is what I would say.
Agreed. No, I agree. Because it's a 1-year punt, I probably would have just kept Lamb, knowing that you're going to be a competitive team next year. If it was like a full-on rebuild and you tore it down, I would be more willing to sell. But given your situation, given the 10-team aspect, like, where does CeeDee Lamb go in startups in a 10-team Superflex league? Is he a first-round pick?
Maybe not a first rounder. I think he's probably like, it's 10-team, right? So there's only 10 picks in the first round. Fair. Like, the quarterbacks are going to go high. Like, obviously Jefferson's still going to go ahead of him and stuff too. Yeah, he'd probably be right on the fringe of the first round there. So definitely an elite asset. No questions about it. So let's speed through these other dynasty trades that we have listed here. This one shouldn't take very long at all because we already talked about this. Quentin Johnston for a 2nd-round pick. He says the pick should be mid or potentially early to mid. He says 204 to 205. He sold them after last week's game when he caught a touchdown, right? Because obviously he caught a touchdown against the Lions, and maybe that gave somebody in your league enough hope to buy into Quentin Johnston, potentially turning the corner down the stretch. And now I would say you're lucky to get a mid to late 2nd-round pick for Quentin Johnston on the open market. So are we both in agreement? You sell Quentin Johnston for any 2 you can get, 24, 25, 26, doesn't matter. You selling him for literally any 2 you could get.
Yeah, in a heartbeat, not even close. If somebody's still willing to offer you 2, you take that, you run, you laugh on the way, because like Quentin Johnston might just be Jalen Reagor.
And again, you might be thinking like, oh, why would I give up on him? It's but that's the sunk cost fallacy, man. Like when you can get out before you're caught holding the bag, like you would be with Terrace Marshall and Rondale Moore and Jalen Reagor and N'Keal Harry. Like, imagine midway through their rookie seasons, if you could have gotten an early to mid 2024 second for those guys, you would have taken it in a heartbeat, knowing the end result of what those guys are now, which is not even worth a 4th-round pick.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So last 2 trades, these guys kind of went together here. So that's why we're grouping them together here. Ryan sends this. He says he's got a 2-part trade, 10-team, start 11. Trade 1 was offered by him a month ago when he was 4-2 and a pretender. So he recognizes that he wasn't quite ready to compete, and he made a rash decision and traded a 2024 first. It doesn't look like it was his 2024 first. If I'm seeing this correctly, maybe it was. I'm just going to assume it was his because he doesn't say otherwise. He said it was just accepted 3 days ago. So he offered this trade a month ago and it was accepted 3 days ago.
Okay. I'm sorry. That is one of the scummiest thing people do in fantasy. For the record, if you're a commissioner and shit like that happens, like if somebody says, "Hey, I offered that a month ago," like there's got to be some type of mediation there because you can't just not check your app and then, oh, cool. Guess what? So and so tears his ACL. Now I'm going to go accept this deal. That is one of the scummiest things I've ever heard. Guess what? Not everybody signs those, 24-hour ticking time bomb offers. Some people just send the offer without even thinking of implementing that. If you're the type of person that looks at a deal from a month ago, knows that there's an obvious value gain that you got from it, and then accept it in the future, you are the worst person in a dynasty league. You suck.
Ryan says it was the commissioner that accepted the trade as well. He said the pick is not mine. It's projected 110. So again, it's a late pick. Again, is there anything inherently against the rules about doing this? Not necessarily. It's just BM. It's just not like it's just in bad taste.
Not to mention, you're the commission. You tell me you're not checking the app in the last month?
Yeah,
shut the fuck up. Like that pisses me off when people do that. Sorry, I'm a little animated, but like, God, you're the commissioner. You can't check your app. You can't decline it a month ago. Piss off.
Yeah, no, that's the worst. When you got, one thing that I always have to make sure I'm doing is after somebody doesn't accept an offer for a couple days, going in and withdrawing them. But if you're probably in multiple leagues, like it's sometimes you forget to do that.
Some people are in 20, 30 leagues. Like I understand an aspect. Yeah, it is. Don't get me wrong. It is your responsibility to be able to cancel the deal. But when people are in 20, 30 leagues, like it happens. You got the notification.
Sleeper should have a setting implemented where if a trade isn't accepted within 3 to 5 days or something, that it automatically withdraws the trade.
Yeah, it should. It should. You know how many times?
That would be interesting. Anyways, he makes the trade for Jonathan Taylor. That pick is expected to be late. The second rounder is there as well. Generally speaking, I think that's a fair price to pay for Jonathan Taylor. Agreed. But then when he realized I'm not a contender, he trades away Jonathan Taylor, a second rounder, and a Daniel Jones, who I don't know if this was pre-Daniel Jones injury or post-Daniel Jones injury, whatever. You go after Anthony Richardson, which is clearly the best asset in this deal and worth well more than Jonathan Taylor, Daniel Jones, and a second rounder.
I mean, it looked ugly based off what this guy did, but I mean, you ended up like a bandit because if you're looking at it right now, you ended up taking a first, 2 seconds, and Daniel Jones basically for Anthony Richardson in a third. That ends up what's equating to?
Yep.
Yeah, so you took it again. Yeah, the first, the 2 seconds, Daniel Jones, and you equated it to Anthony Richardson. Go give me Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, the twos were early, is what he has listed here. But even still, dude, like they're not good enough assets to get me off of Anthony Richardson.
What's Daniel Jones worth at this point? A mid 2 with the ACL injury, knowing that the Giants could replace him in the draft.
Probably. Like I think Daniel Jones needs to be treated the same way that Ryan Tannehill and Jimmy Garoppolo are treated realistically from a dynasty perspective. Are they top 32 quarterbacks in the world and they should start for an NFL team? Probably, but are they exciting? No,
they're bridge guys. I mean, like Teddy Bridgewater was in that kind of vein when he was like a starting quarterback a little bit. Hendon Hooker's going to be the next one up.
Yeah, probably. But anyways, we can rapid fire now through the waiver stuff because it's not the greatest week of waivers. A lot of these guys are like flex play types. Who do you have? Like, this is what we do. So if you guys are new around here, we're going to go through our make sure they're rostered type of guys. So just make sure that these guys, and the big 2 examples this week are Zach Charbonnet and AJ Dillon, because both of their starters went down this past week and both of them are in line for RB2 or better workloads going forward. So if Zach Charbonnet is available in your league, every last dime of fab that is on your roster, you send out for him. If AJ Dillon is available in your league, every last dime of fab that you have is put out for AJ Dillon. I would prefer Charbonnet of the 2, but I actually think Jones's injury is more severe. So if you need long-term running back health or running back help, then AJ Dillon actually might be the better long-term option there for you. So make sure those guys are rostered. If there's anybody else, Danny, that you think of that's like a make sure they're rostered type of guy, like Keaton Mitchell obviously was pretty highly rostered, talked about for the last couple of weeks. He should definitely be rostered as well.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think about it. I can't really think about anybody else, to be honest. Like Kyler, I'm assuming Kyler Murray's rostered at this point. Like he has to be, right?
Like Trey McBride, I'm sure is rostered at this point. Like those type of guys. So any of those guys available, drop the house on them. Otherwise, number 5 on my list is Khalil Shakir. Shakir has been consistently floating in the 75% snap share range, which makes him a reasonable flex option. He had 20 PPR points or 20 or more PPR points this past week, caught a long touchdown. Every week, this guy's a low-end flex play. Like you guys can see the way that the offense has shifted when Dawson Knox went down with an injury. they started using a permanent full-time slot receiver. And I really hope with Dawson Knox eligible to come back soon that they don't shift back to it, because the way that their offense is functioning, like minus the turnovers, is definitely what they need to be doing going forward. So Shakir, if you guys need, like, I mean, we still have bye weeks in week 13. There's guys that you're going to maybe need for fill-in production. There's a lot of, he's actually on bye in week 13,
yeah.
But either way, there's going to be injuries. There already was injuries. Like, you're probably going to need injury fillers and stuff like that. So Shakir, for me, he's my 5th best ad of the week. He's 15% rostered. And he also, like, I would be willing to spend 20-30% of my remaining fab budget on him if I needed a wide receiver.
Yeah. Now, for what it's worth, I do think that the top 5 is pretty bunched up this week. You can make a case for somebody at 5 for 1 or 1 for 5 and vice versa.
Yeah, it's going to depend on your team needs, realistically.
With that being said, Khalil Shakir is actually my number 2 this week. I think there's a real possibility moving forward he is higher in the pecking order than Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis obviously is a volatile player in his own right. He will have his big games, but I do think from a consistency week-to-week basis, Shakir provides more for this offense. Had that bad game against Denver, but out of that Bills offense, who didn't have a bad game against Denver? Josh Allen looked bad. Gabe Davis looked bad. Like, it was a complete yeah, Dalton Kincaid's the only like consistent force in this offense. Stephon Diggs has had bad weeks the last couple weeks. Yep. But regardless, Shakir had a bad game in that game. Ever since that game, in the 3 other ones prior to that, the 2 prior to that, one this week, 15.2 PPR points, 9.7 PPR points, 22.5 PPR points with that big time touchdown he caught from Josh Allen. Does play the Eagles next week, another high profile game, must-win environment for the Buffalo Bills. I do think he's, again, a top 40-ish level wide receiver for that game. And like I kind of said, if there's a real possibility moving forward that he could potentially be the number 3 weapon on this team, number 2 wide receiver, I think he's got to be higher, in my opinion, in the priority, because, I mean, Josh Allen is just that good of a player.
Yeah, I mean, it was a perfect storm for Khalil Shakir this week, I will say, because the outside wide receivers and those outside corners for the Jets are a difficult matchup. I said before the week, this is a Kincaid, James Cook, Khalil Shakir game, and that's exactly what happened. So I think going forward, Gabe Davis will be more involved than he was. He can't score against the Jets. Like, he has been horrible in his career against the Jets. So if you played Gabe Davis, that's your own fault. Like, he has been horrible against the Jets. Yeah. And I talked about that in the wide receiver tier list. My number 4 on the list. I'll let you get one more point in on Shakir here, but I want to wrap this up soon. Yeah, no, last thing I quickly want to say on Shakir, he does have that week 13 bye, which stings, but the majority of the year, again, like I said, the Bills are desperate. They need to play. They need to win football games, and there's going to be high game environment games against the Eagles, against the Chiefs, against the Cowboys, against the Chargers, against the Patriots. Like, those games are probably going to have, if not the highest game total of the week, one of the top 3 game totals of the week, with the Bills going up against those teams respectively, because those offenses are going to be able to put up points on the Bills on the other end. Yeah, and some special ed actually said in the chat here, ESPN redraft leagues default to expire in 2 to 3 days, which is interesting, because I wish Sleeper would implement that as well, because like, people sitting on offers for a month is stupid as hell. Number 4 for me, and again, this could be number 1 if you're really desperate for a tight end. Isaiah Likely I have listed here at number 4, 2% rostered, so he's probably available in literally every league that you guys are in. 6.3 targets per game and 9.3 PPR points per game in the 3 games that Mark Andrews missed last year. So, and Isaiah Likely was also a rookie last year, so that's pretty impressive. Logical replacement as well for those of you guys that like literally just lost Mark Andrews. You could just go up and pick up his backup if there's no better options available on the waiver wire. So he's the premier option if you guys are in need of a tight end. Maybe the tight end you have was Mark Andrews, or maybe it was just somebody that's underperforming that you've been using. Isaiah Likely is definitely a good ad. Yeah, I agree. He's also my number 4 as well. Like you kind of said, seamless transition. We saw Likely with a big time upside ceiling in this offense just last year. Lamar Jackson playing at, if not near MVP level. I mean, the Ravens offense still was able to put up points despite losing Andrews early in that game. I think he got hurt in like the 3rd or 4th offensive play. Yeah, and it was the first quarter. Like I was on the way to St. Louis to watch the game, and he was already hurt when I got there, and I got there at like 8:40 or something. Yeah, so I mean, you're expecting this offense to continue being good. Isaiah Likely is a good enough player to earn his own role, and this is still a very ambiguous receiver core. We feel like Zay Flowers is number 1. We feel like Odell's a number 2 at this point, but at the same time, I mean, Odell's been clearly up and down all year, so I wouldn't be shocked if Likely was actually the number 2 in this progression. Yeah, and I think you could put Beckham onto this list because he had a big game or whatever, but I'm not overly excited about Odell Beckham. He also got banged up in that game too, so we got to see what his health status is. So my number 3 guy is Jaden Reed, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. 80 plus total yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He's gone over double-digit fantasy points more often this year than he hasn't, which is pretty crazy. If you look at his entire game log, he's actually been relatively good all season, despite not playing some snaps here and there. A lot of his down games were games that he like fumbled and then he got benched and stuff like that. Yeah. This Green Bay wide receiver core, care to guess what the target distribution in terms of targets per route run is between Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, and Romeo Doubs?
Well, I'm going to assume right off the bat that Romeo Doubs gets the most targets, but I believe actually when I talked about Jayden Reed last week, he leads his team in receiving yards.
He does, but it's 20% targets per route run for Doubs, 17% for Christian Watson, and 19% for Jayden Reed. So this is like, you know how we talked about coming into the season that we thought like the Commanders would be like Terry, Samuel, and Dotson like all bunched together?
Yeah.
That's kind of how this Green Bay core has been. And Jayden Reed actually has been the big play threat of this group, surprisingly, playing on the team with Christian Watson, who hasn't, like, I mean, found the end zone this week, but he hasn't been really good at all. So Jayden Reed, again, if you need bye week fillers, he's already had his bye, obviously, I think. Maybe I'm making another mistake.
Week 6.
Already?
Week 6.
Yeah, okay. So he's had his bye already. So if you have some bye weeks coming up, maybe you have Stephon Diggs or whoever in week 13 coming up on bye. Jayden Reed's a fine option, and he's a rookie, and sometimes rookies can kind of sun run the rest of the season. So really like Jayden Reed as like a flex option. But again, none of these guys are like superstar world beaters.
Yeah, he's also my number 3. Basically summed it up there. Involved weapon in this offense. Looks like their best receiver at this point. Hoping for our sake and for our skin in the game that Christian Watson does figure it out. But I mean, Jayden Reed has been objectively the better receiver. This offense showed signs of life against the Chargers. Jordan Love looked a lot more comfortable standing back in the pocket there. So if Jayden Reed is going to continue being this involved and continue seeing more snaps, again, 69% of the snaps this week, despite having, a couple games there, 48%, 39%, if he's getting 65, 70+% of the snaps and really working into that full-time slot role, he's going to have a lot of value in this offense.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if we have the exact same order as well, because we didn't prepare this like together. Like we just kind of wrote down our best waiver ads. My number 2 is Rashid Shaheed.
He's my 5.
He's your 5. Okay, so we don't have this because you have Shakir at 2. Okay, so we don't have the same order. So 33% rostered is Rashid Shaheed. We've seen the spike weeks, just 5 targets per game. Michael Thomas is out for a while based on the injury that he suffered last week or before the bye week. It was called significant at the time, so I'm not sure. Like, it wasn't an ACL tear. I think we would have heard that by now, but it was probably like a grade 2 or grade 3, like MCL sprain or something like that. Wouldn't be shocked if Thomas goes to IR, or maybe he's just out for a couple of weeks. Either way, there's room here for Shaheed, who, by the way, Michael Thomas, even though he's an injury-prone receiver, hasn't missed a game this season. So with Rashid Shaheed, if he's going to be the number 2 receiver opposite Chris Olave, and of course, we know what he can do from like a big play standpoint. He's had a number of long catches and long touchdowns. Rashid Shaheed could be a legitimate option for those of you guys that need, again, a flex option. It's not a very running back centric week. A lot of my 6 to 10 in tomorrow's waiver ads are just like handcuffs, basically kind of Gainwell types and shit like that. But there is a fair decent amount of like wide receiver production pieces that you could throw into your flex.
Yeah, no, I would agree there with Rashid Shaheed. A little bit worried about, how strong this offense is going to be. I
think the bye will help Derek Carr's throwing shoulder a lot, which is why I actually prefer Shaheed to Khalil Shakir and Jayden Reed.
Again, we're skimming it here. Like,
we're splitting hairs. What do you value? Do you value the targets? Do you value the big plays? Do you value the offense? Like, that would put you in any, like, the targets favor Jayden Reed. The big plays favor Rashid Shaheed, and the offense favors Khalil Shakir. You could literally go in any which direction, depending on what you want. The number 1 ad for me, I guess he's the number 1 for you as well, is Demario Douglas, who probably was dropped in some leagues because the Patriots were just on bye. 27% rostered. He has a 77.1 PFF receiving grade on the season, which is a really good number for a day 3 rookie, 1.98 yards per route run. He is averaging nearly 7 targets per game in the games that the Patriots have had him operate as a top 3 receiver in the pecking order, 80% plus of the overall routes and offensive snaps. The Patriots, like I said, were on bye this past week, so I'm sure a lot of people had to drop Demario Douglas if they needed, a streaming defense or streaming quarterback or whatever they needed on their team. And the Chiefs, are on the Patriots schedule, and they're the only team that is not a bottom 10 defense in defending wide receivers. So the Patriots, literally, other than the Kansas City Chiefs game, I think it's in like week 13 or 14, have the easiest schedule basically for the rest of the year for wide receivers. So if Demario Douglas is going to get 6, 7, 8 targets a game against like cake matchups, then he has a chance to really be a league winner down the stretch as a flex option.
next 2 weeks in particular, especially with the crunch time, you're trying to get your playoff spots, you're trying to set your seeding. He plays a game on the road against the Giants. Both teams have incentives to lose, but at the same time, Demario Douglas has been the quality number one wide receiver for this team. 3 double-digit PPR games in his last 4 outings. Has looked like the number one guy. So he does have the Giants this upcoming week. Does play the Chargers after that, at Pittsburgh Steelers, and then obviously that Week 15 game against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, he's going to have a tough matchup against the Chiefs, no doubt about it. But if he gets you to the playoffs between weeks 12 and 14, I don't think you're going to be complaining much there. He's my number one as well. Anytime a rookie wide receiver shows this level of upside, I have to pay attention. And he has shown a consistent baseline every single week. Again, 6 targets, 7 targets, 7 targets, and 9 targets in his last 4 outings.
Yeah, definitely a pretty good option. Of course, I will have like a full updated list after Monday Night Football tomorrow morning, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Also, we'll be breaking down some of the strength of schedule stuff that we kind of just touched on tomorrow afternoon. We'll get back to the super chats because a lot of you guys sent some, and then we'll close this thing out hopefully before the hour 30 mark. So, Christian, Tank Dell, top 15 rest of the season. What are your thoughts?
That's a little high for me. Wide receiver 2, potentially get there. Top 15, it's tough because then you're comparing him to guys like Jalen Waddle, Garrett Wilson, Brandon Ayuk, Puka Nacua.
Yeah.
I have Puka Nacua a little bit higher personally. I think he's at 10 for me, but it's tough to get him in the 15. But you want to argue him like 16 to 20 range? I think that's very reasonable.
I will move him right now. So on the spot, I will tell you exactly where I would put Tank Dell. So right now, I got to move Amari Cooper down. I got to move a couple of these guys down. I have Christian Kirk at wide receiver 18. That is exactly where Tank Dell is going, right behind Christian Kirk at wide receiver 19. Michael Pittman's immediately behind him. Marquise Brown's immediately behind him. I got to move T. Higgins down a little bit, obviously, now too. What's up?
Adam Thielen or Tank Dell?
Oh, Tank Dell, not close. I have Adam Thielen in the 30s for me right now. I'm not convinced that Adam Thielen is good. Like, I mean, it's not because he's like a horrible
too much
option,
volume.
But like I have Drake London, DJ Moore, like Marquise Brown ahead of him, who I think are better options.
It's too much volume. He's a top 20 option for me. But Tank Dell's 19 now for the record. I moved him. Cooper Kupp or Tank Dell knowing the ankle sprain?
I don't think Kupp will be out for more than like 2 games, so I would still take Cooper Kupp.
You're taking Garrett Wilson? I'm assuming?
Yeah, I would. 100%.
Devontae Smith, Chris Olave, Jalen Waddle, I'm assuming. Mike Evans obviously is got to be a riser as well.
Where
are you ranking Mike Evans?
8.
You have him at 8?
I had him at 8 before this week.
Wow. Okay. I have him at
Mike Evans just continues to do what he does, so I'm not going to even doubt him anymore.
I mean, I'm going to move Jamar Chase below, but I have him.
There's a massive cluster of guys in this like mid-range wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3 range.
Your top 7 is pretty set, though. Allen, Jefferson, Diggs, Amon-Ra, AJ, CD, Tyreek. Pretty much.
I have Tyreek, Diggs, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, CD, Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen is the way my top 7 goes.
Yeah, so the same 7 guys, different order. Yeah. I have CD at 2, Amon-Ra at 4, AJ at 3. Tyreek still at 1, I believe, and Diggs at 5.
Yeah, I still have Diggs at 2 for the time being. I might adjust that a little bit and move St. Brown and CD ahead of them, but we'll see.
Yeah. Fair. Got super lucky, as ESPN said, at a 9% chance of victory at one point. Yeah, Jesus, man. Me
and Danny actually have a matchup this week in our listener league, and we have a little Monday night thriller. I mean, it's probably going to go to me. I have Swift going up 20 points, and you have Isaiah Pacheco and Rashee Rice. But if the Eagles struggle, it's at home for the Chiefs. Like maybe they put up a lot of points in this game.
You gotta love having both Packers backs, and the one that I start is the one that gets hurt. So that's great.
Well, I mean, you weren't going to start AJ Dillon.
No, I know, but it's just fucking frustrating, man.
Yeah, you also
have Dillon
as well.
Yeah, combined brutal. For 7 points.
Yeah,
I think JJ is back this week with the loss. I think he's either back this week or after the bye.
Soon, I think. But there was a report that came out that said that he might not be back yet.
Well, the thing is apparently he wants to feel fully comfortable when he comes back. He doesn't feel that yet. The problem with JJ right now is that they haven't had their bye. It's a week 13 bye. So if he's not back for week 12 this week, you're going to be without him until week 14.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, which is affecting me literally in our listener league because I was also without him.
I mean, you're a playoff team though, so it shouldn't really.
I'm 6-5 now, man. Like I'm 6-5.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you got to find a way to tread water for sure.
So I'm every year.
Tyler dropped a super sticker here. Let me go back and find his comment because I did see it at one point. I'm gonna keep looking for that. There's by the way, Zach Wilson was benched, so
I saw that.
Tim Boyle is going to start on Friday, which is weird. Redraft trade, Diggs and Chase for Bijan and Waddle, 8 and 3 making the playoffs. I want Diggs and Chase, to be honest.
Yeah, same all day. I appreciate the super chat there, Tyler. I almost said Styler. Any bets for tonight? I mean, Bush is the bets guy. Where's Matt when you need him?
Yeah, I will. I'll talk to Dylan later in like Discord or something. I'll craft a bet with you later. For sure. I will say though, like where I'm leaning, if you guys are betting on this game tonight, I don't think it's going to hit the over. If you're expecting a high scoring game with the Eagles and Chiefs, I think it will be a low scoring game personally.
Mahomes close favorite off a bye. He's my lock of the week for a reason. Like I talked about that on the Sunday stream. I love Chiefs minus 2.5.
How did our I think I hit my going nuts pick, didn't I? I had Brandon
Ayuk. You had 2, and you had your safe play, which was what's his face? Who went safe? Who was your safe?
Brian Robinson?
No, it might have been.
Hold on, let me look.
I
also,
remember
our going nuts
Singletary.
Yes, Singletary. Yeah. Our going nuts picks from 2 weeks ago, by the way, both hit a going nuts week this week because I picked Calvin Ridley and you picked who was the guy that you picked? Tank Dell?
Yeah.
No. Who was it?
I forget, man. Honestly,
it was. I remember because I remember when I was watching the game.
Terry. No. Who was it? Fuck. Now I'm actually thinking who wide receiver the rest of the season. Blah blah blah. Well, I mean, for starters, I can just look at who went off this week, right?
I can't believe you guys gave me 1 point for Brandon Ayuk. That's ridiculous.
Come on, he's a beast. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, but I was 1 and 8.
Fair. Dion. Oh wait, no, not who the fuck went off this week? DJ Moore.
DJ Moore.
Yeah, because it was the revenge game narrative on Thursday Night Football.
Oh, right. Yeah. So
or something like that. Yeah.
Also, my lock of the week missed by half a point as well. Bucks 49ers was 41 points.
I know. I was actually when I was updating that, I was laughing a little bit.
So fun.
So far for our head-to-head. So Kyler outscored Stroud straight up, and then in half PPR, like Devontae Smith should get 6.3, so that should even out.
I feel like every single week our head-to-head bets are even.
Well, I mean, our rest of season PPR Hawk versus Andrews is fried now because fucking Andrews is hurt.
Yeah.
Garbage. Watson versus Olave.
I mean, I can't believe I said at a point in the season that I'd take Christian Watson over Chris Olave. I almost don't even remember saying that, but I'm sure I did because I liked Watson quite a bit at one point.
It was like week 3. I think Olave was coming off a bad game, and you're like, I don't like Olave. I think I'd even take Christian Watson over him. I'm like, you want to bet that rest of the season? You're like, yes.
Yeah, not great. But yeah, Dynasty 12-team Superflex tight end premium. This will be the last thing that we answer, and then we'll head off of here. Trade Stroud 2024 101, Lance and a third for Herbert, Stevenson, Jonnu, and a mid first. So absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, Stroud honestly might be worth this whole package himself. Justin Herbert's in this. Never mind, he's not.
But I mean, Stroud and
101 versus a mid first this year is going to be a pretty large deal in terms of projected value. Like as much as the class is good and a mid first is going to be like one of those top receivers or maybe the quarterback 3 or something, or maybe RB1, maybe Brock Bowers. I mean, like even if you hate Caleb Williams, like we're talking Harrison or Drake May, like these guys they're all really good prospects.
The way you look at it here is one side's giving up 2 top 8 overall assets. The other side's only giving up 1. So therefore, you take the
and then the next best asset is the mid first, which will probably be like a 4th round startup pick, and then Ramondre is like a 7th round startup pick, probably.
Yep, fully agree.
Yeah. So also, I mean, in your team situation too, like you said, your 3rd place, you lost Mark Andrews. I'm not in the business of just trying to backfill with Jonnu Smith. Like this is the example of like a bad contenders trade. Like you don't want to sell off on a guy like CJ Stroud in the 101 just because you're trying to contend.
Yeah. What's crazy, by the way, is if you had said this like before the season, it would actually be pretty close. But with how Stroud's ascended, man, you can make the argument that he might be valued higher than Herbert. Again, I would take Herbert, but I know some people.
Yeah, they're probably in the same tier for most people.
Yep. No, I agree there.
Okay, so that is the end of the stream. Again, stay tuned for later today. We will be live before the Monday Night Football game. Big game, obviously, Super Bowl rematch. And then as far as like our schedule for the rest of the season, or the rest of the week, I'll let you guys know because obviously it is a little bit wonky this week because of Thanksgiving and Black Friday having. On Tuesday, we will have waivers, which is tomorrow. Strength to schedule stuff will come out in the afternoon on Tuesday. Wednesday, we'll do league winning trade targets because I'm sure a lot of you guys have your trade deadlines this week or maybe they're next week or whatever. So we're going to definitely focus in on guys that can help you win your league trade targets. If your trade target window is still open, obviously mine actually in my home league passed this week. And then matchups that matter will come out on Wednesday afternoon instead of Thursday afternoon because there is a bunch of games on Thursday. And then Thursday morning at, I don't know, noon or 11:30 or whatever before the Thanksgiving games kick off, we'll do a live stream and we'll really dig in depth with where we have the guys in the Thanksgiving games ranked, because I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to have questions about that. It's a short week and all that kind of stuff. So we'll really, hone in on each game, be like, okay, this guy's an RB2 this week. This guy's a wide receiver 1 this week, whatever. And then on Friday, because there's also a Black Friday game, we'll be live before that. And we'll have a Dynasty Rookie Watch buy, sell, hold report in the morning. And then instead of having wide receiver tier list on Friday because there's a game on, wide receiver and running back tier list will both come out Saturday. One of them, I'm not sure what time, but like they'll both come out on the day on Saturday. So if you guys, later on in the week need some help, we'll have you covered right up until. And the nice thing is that both of us will have access to all the injury information that we need.
Yes, no, exactly.
Oh, Danny just closes out his stream there. But anyways, I will close it out. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Love to see that. Danny is coming back. He probably could have just signed off if he wanted to. But again, hit the like, subscribe, check out the site. Again, if you missed the announcement earlier on in the stream, we are going to be doing a site exclusive site only video going forward once a week now. So by signing up on Flock Fantasy and using code FSE, you'll get a bonus video every single week now. So definitely check that out. The one that we're doing this week, that'll probably be live tomorrow or on Wednesday, is how to trade for contending assets if you're a contender in season in Dynasty, because I'm sure a lot of you guys right now, this is like a crucial time to be doing that because we're just on the precipice of the fantasy playoffs. So you're definitely going to want to see that. We will not be dropping that on YouTube. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out and we'll talk to you soon.